The first signals appear just above the ground, not far from a shallow drainage edge where water has been sitting for days. The air is thick enough that movement feels slightly resisted. Along the grass line, small points of light begin to interrupt the darkness, not continuously, but in intervals, scattered and uneven. They do not appear everywhere. Just a few meters away, where the soil is drier, and the air moves more freely, the lights are absent. This uneven distribution is not random. It reflects a set of constraints that shape when and where this behavior becomes viable. The flashing behavior depends on proximity, not just visual proximity between individuals, but spatial overlap within a narrow layer of air close to the ground. In dry conditions, this layer becomes unstable. Air currents disperse chemical signals, reduce visibility through dust or turbulence, and increase the energy cost of maintaining position during flight. In humid conditions, that layer stabilizes. Moist air is denser and tends to move less abruptly near the surface, especially in areas shielded by vegetation or terrain. This creates a more predictable space, in which movement can be controlled with lower effort. Flight paths become shorter, more contained. Individuals remain within a limited radius, increasing the likelihood of repeated encounters. The flashes, then, are not isolated signals. They are part of a system that depends on repeated visibility within a confined volume of space. If that space expands or breaks apart, the signals lose continuity. Humidity also alters the surface itself. The ground retains moisture, softening the upper layer of soil. This affects not only the adults but the earlier stages that develop within it. Larvae remain closer to the surface when moisture is available, and the transition to adulthood occurs in environments where emergence does not require deeper excavation or exposure to dry air. As a result, adult activity becomes concentrated in areas where the ground condition supports recent emergence. This creates localized clusters. Within these clusters, signaling becomes more effective not because the signals are stronger, but because the spacing between individuals is reduced. Each flash enters the visual field of others more frequently. Timing patterns begin to overlap, not through coordination, but through repeated exposure within a shared environment. In drier conditions, spacing increases. Individuals disperse more widely, either because the ground conditions forced a more scattered emergence, or because the air conditions make sustained positioning more difficult. The same signaling behavior continues, but the probability of overlap decreases. The system does not stop functioning. It becomes less efficient. Humidity also affects visibility in another way. Moist air can carry small particles that scatter light, but at low altitudes and moderate levels. It can also reduce the contrast between background darkness and ambient noise. In these conditions, brief pulses of light remain distinct against a relatively uniform background. In contrast, dry conditions often introduce variability, dust, shifting air layers, or sharper temperature gradients that interfere with consistent visual detection. Signals may still be produced, but their detection range becomes less predictable. This introduces a trade-off. Producing light carries an energy cost. If the environment reduces the likelihood that a signal will be detected, the cost remains while the benefit declines. Over time, activity shifts toward conditions where the cost-to-benefit ratio is more stable. Humidity is one of those conditions. It does not trigger the behavior directly. Instead, it maintains a set of environmental parameters that allow the behavior to remain effective. Temperature plays a role as well, but within a narrower range. When combined with humidity, it affects metabolic rates, influencing how long individuals remain active during a given period. Warmer, humid air allows for sustained activity without rapid energy depletion, while cooler or drier air shortens the window in which movement and signaling can be maintained. This further concentrates activity into specific periods. The result is a pattern that appears seasonal and weather dependent, but is more accurately described as conditional. When multiple constraints align: stable air, moist ground, moderate temperature, the behavior becomes visible at a higher density. Outside of those conditions, it continues at lower levels, often unnoticed. Predation risk is also part of this balance. Remaining close to the ground, within vegetation or near water, provides partial cover. Humid environments tend to support denser plant growth, which creates more fragmented lines of sight. This reduces exposure during signaling. In open, dry areas, visibility increases not only for other individuals, but also for predators. In those conditions, prolonged signaling becomes more costly. Shorter flights, lower altitudes, and intermittent flashing patterns are more viable in environments where concealment is available. Humidity, by supporting these environments, indirectly, reduces the risk associated with signaling. This does not eliminate risk, it redistributes it. Activity becomes concentrated in spaces where the balance between visibility and concealment is maintained. These spaces are often small, sometimes only a few meters across, defined by slight variations in terrain, moisture retention, and airflow. Within them, the behavior appears consistent. Outside them, it becomes fragmented. Over time, this leads to a familiar pattern. On certain evenings, under specific conditions, the number of visible signals increases sharply within these confined areas. The behavior seems to emerge suddenly, but it is the accumulation of multiple aligned factors rather than a single trigger. The individuals are not responding to a signal that initiates the behavior. They are operating within a set of conditions that allow the behavior to function without excessive cost. As those conditions shift, the visible pattern changes. If the air dries, the ground hardens, or wind increases, the same individuals may remain present, but their activity becomes less detectable. Distances increase, durations shorten, and the overlap between signals decreases. The system persists, but its visibility declines. In this sense, the appearance of these lights in humid summer conditions is not an isolated event. It is the visible portion of a process that depends on environmental stability. At a small scale, near the drainage edge, the air remains heavy. Movement stays contained. The ground continues to hold moisture. Within this narrow space, the signals repeat, not continuously, and not in unison, but often enough that they begin to form a pattern that can be observed from a distance. A few steps away, where the air shifts and the ground dries, the pattern dissolves. The behavior does not end there. It becomes less connected, less visible, and less likely to be noticed as a continuous sequence. What appears as a seasonal display is, at a smaller scale, a response to conditions that allow repeated interaction within a limited space. As long as those conditions return, the pattern will reappear localized, intermittent, and dependent on the same narrow alignment of air, ground, and movement.